Hi everyone, it's me, Arden Lee. I wanted to come on and chat tonight. I want to make another video on twin flames, and I wanted to make a video this time on how do we know that we've reached the 0 point, right? Because if you've been following my twin flames videos for a little while, pretty much the main philosophy that I have espoused is worry less about who your twin flame is, or worry less about the attachment to that person that you suspect may be your twin flame. And instead, use the folks who are showing up for you in the twin flame dynamic as a mirror to judge how far you are from the 0 point of your own inner union, right? Which is often known as secure attachment, basically, in more mundane terms. But also that balance of anything that may be polarized in you such that you feel that you need another person outside of you, aka your twin, in order to give that to you or to complete you, right? Because of course, like attracts like and wholeness attracts wholeness. And so it is only when we are in our own inner union, right, that balance, that we then can be in the right state of wholeness to attract another person who is whole. And that is the only way that the twin flame dynamic is going to work, right? Because you and your twin, being mirrors of one another, if you are polarized out here with things like runner chaser dynamics, anxious avoidant attachment, even things like not really accessing the full range of your gifts, or at least the knowledge of your gifts, right? You don't necessarily have to be able to do everything that your twin does, but if you know you can't do those things, then you can then outsource them, right? Then you know what you don't know. And you don't need anything from your twin specifically to complete you. You can have a wonderful, happy life being complete and knowing that you can source healthy and happy and thriving and exciting and romantic partnership from that place of inner union, of balance, being able to create the things that you want and or need for yourself, right? So not to focus on who the person is, rather to focus on what that mirror is showing you, whoever shows up for you, in a way that is aligned and in a way that carries all of those twin flame connections and synchronicities and all the hallmarks of the path, right? And one thing that I certainly did prove to myself on my path is that more than one person can come along and mirror you with those same twin flame hallmark signs, synchronicities, etc., and that intense connection. So the question is, right? So basically, I made a video earlier this week on the Escaping Twin Flames doc on Netflix, on the cult, right? The so-called cult, anyway, the alleged cult, the bad business, anyway, of Twin Flames universe, and how Jeff and Shalea purported to be able to tell you who your twin flame is, right? And what I basically said in that video myself is, first of all, no one can tell you who your twin flame is. And even if there were someone who claimed to be able, and maybe they could, maybe they couldn't, how would you know that you could trust that person as well? So my feeling is even if we may have a sense that something is predestined, well, then it's predestined. We don't have to worry about it, right? And then we just get to the 0 point, and we should believe, if we truly believe it's predestined, then we should believe it's going to happen either way. So if you really think someone is meant for you, you should be the most hands off, right? You're going to be like, oh, this is fine. I already know this is going to happen, so it's okay. Or we can't tell what is predestined, or maybe nothing is predestined. Who knows? We're all just fumbling our way around in this reality that we call planet Earth. And in that case, then we do, again, use that dynamic that shows up for us as a mirror. And then the person who meets us when we are in our own balance, well, then that is our twin flame, because they are the mathematical match to us when we are in our own inner union, right? And that's why I like teaching the path with this way, because anyone can use it, actually. Anyone can use that paradigm, regardless of whether there is, an actual twin flame connection there or not. Whatever it is, you're gonna get there, right? whether you are truly on the wild and wacky spiritual initiation journey that the twin flame path is, or whether you're just healing your attachment wounds. And it kind of doesn't matter ultimately, right? If you're, you can't miss what's meant for you. So whatever it is, if you get yourself into your own inner harmony, you're going to attract a great relationship from that place. So the issue is, I was watching back that video and I was listening to myself talk, because I keep talking about how to get to the 0 point. And I'm like, Arden, you haven't told people how do you know? How do you know that you're at the 0 point? Because I had some people reach out to me and ask me that, or I've heard people in the past be like, yeah, like I think I'm at the 0 point now. Like I've done a lot of work, and I don't want to say this like, here's how I don't want to come up. I don't want to come up and be like, well, I'm at the 0 point, but you're definitely not, right? Because like I don't want to come off as like, oh, I know everything and I know that I'm at this place, but nobody else is, and I have the weird vague secret and you have to listen to it from me, right? That's not at all what I intend to say. What I intend to say is that spiritual awakening as a journey in itself, and truly any kind of exponential growth, is so expansive to our systems, right? To our mind-body systems and our experience, that oftentimes whenever we reach a new level, it feels unprecedented. And what that means, and I'm speaking for my own experience as well, right? There's been so many times that like, this is so big, like I'm here, like I must be here, this must be it, and then surprise, no, it's like there's more and more and more. So if every level is an unprecedented level of expansion, chances are when we get to that level, until we've really integrated it and then we see what we need to do next, which each of those steps can take time, as it should. Our integration we should give ourselves time to integrate every place that we get to, rather than just trying to speed through, right? As much as I understand that desire, that impulse. Then until we get there and we've rested and we've seen what we need to do next, we're not going to be able to picture the next level and the next level and the next level. If we could, chances are we would be there already. Oftentimes the way that we get there is we get to a place where, oh, we can picture it, and now we can see what is out of alignment with the way that we are currently, like our current iteration, and what we need to do in order to get to the next one. That is and in that crunch is that like divine dissatisfaction, where you're like, oh, no wonder I don't have XYZ yet, because these are the things in me that I'm not doing, right? And then that's the invitation to do those things, to get there, to notice what is out of alignment with our current way of being, that is out of alignment with where we want to be, and to change those things. So I say this with utmost love and compassion, that saying like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm at the 0 point, like that's just a common experience in any kind of awakening, is to think that we're somewhere because we have done a lot of work, and the level that we're at feels farther than we have ever been before. And I'm certainly I can't judge anyone else's work or progress or what have you, and certainly that's not in any way my intention. But I want to be able to share with you guys what I did, because there is, I believe, a way to set up a communication with your own relationship to spirit in order to have spirit communicate to you when you've reached that point. And I think that, like many of these journeys, I think that my journey was also deeply informed by my own understanding of the path, my own model of it, and how that showed up for me almost certainly informed what my spirits created for me, or what the universe created for me, or what the path created for me, however you want to say that, so that I would be able to understand it within the framework of the understanding that I had. I hope that makes sense. I'll explain it better. But if you guys have done any sort of, you know, divination or communication with the universe, with spirit to find things out, you may be familiar with techniques such as, all right, I have a question. Should I don't know, should I apply to grad school or should I not apply to grad school? If I go out and I see a blue duck, that means yes. But if I see a green mouse, you know, like that means no. And so you give spirit a way to communicate with you. You give spirit a way of saying, if this happens, that's how I'll know this thing. And I've had that happen, you know, to me. I've been able to use that technique with really remarkable success. So I highly recommend it for any time you are trying to increase your communication with your spirit team, with your astral allies, however you wish to refer to the unseen forces that be that are helping us along our path. And what I did when I really, truly, and fully surrendered to the twin flame journey, which for me also meant accepting that it was probably far longer and far greater than I was capable of understanding at the time. Kind of saying like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna stop asking, are we there yet? I'm gonna go with it. It was 2018, and I had just put out my album, Who Can You Trust? I released that year a 5-song EP with my band Arden and the Wolves, and it was called Who Can You Trust? And it showed up, the things that I wrote in that EP showed up in not only my life, but also in the larger collective in a really, really strong way. The album was called Who Can You Trust? And it was all about, for me anyway, learning discernment and healing the hurts that had happened in my past. And it happened that the finishing of that album coincided with the cresting of the Me Too movement into the mainstream. And I don't credit myself like, oh my God, I made an album and I think I caused the Me Too movement, right? That's certainly not in any way a claim that I make. But as a magician, as I always say, when you put things out into the world, it's on you to observe, okay, what did I do? And then what happened in response, even if it's only for your personal practice, right? To say, okay, well, not only did I heal, but also this larger healing was also happening in the collective along that time, whether I had something to do with that or not. And therefore, being unable to deny these large scale results, again, whether they're just personal for my own healing or whether they had a larger ripple or somewhere in between perhaps. What then do I want to do for my next album? If I create this work, if I create these hypersigils, these works of narrative magic, and they apparently are capable of changing my reality so drastically, what is the thing that I want most next? And the place that I was at that time was I had accepted it finally, that like all this stuff about the twin flame path that had been haunting me, I was like, well, it's not going away. And so I might as well, even if it sounds crazy or it feels it feels real delulu, you know, and certainly like, good God, going online and like Googling twin flames or, you know, searching for support in the Facebook groups was not helpful to making me feel any more sane about this thing that was happening to me. But yeah, I had basically said, okay, well, if I am going to assume that this is real, that this is a real thing that is happening to me, and apparently what it is, you know, you meet your twin and they bring up everything in you. You bring up everything in each other that is out of alignment with unconditional love. And it is a challenge then to shed your conditioning and repattern yourself into your own inner harmony and inner balance, and secure attachment, such that like that's the only way that you can get there. That's the only way that you are ever going to be in union with your twin, is you can only control what happens on your side. And you just do your own inner work and you get there and you try as much as possible to kind of like not worry about how it's showing up for the other person. Because again, if it's meant to be, it will happen, right? And early on, as I was still trying to wrap my head around this whole thing that was happening to me, there was a person who had more knowledge of the twin flame path than I did, who I was listening to their advice. And they said to me that you'll know that you'll know you've achieved unconditional love, right? Which is basically, that's the 0 point. You'll know that you're able to love that person unconditionally, that like you've done it, when you could be just as happy with them as without them. And of course, at the time I was like, oh my God, but if they're your person, if they're your twin flame, right? If they're your true love, how could you possibly? But that, I guess, was the paradox. That was the mystery. And so in 2018, after my album, Who Can You Trust, came out, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what is my next album going to be? I guess, what do I want more than anything else? And at that time, the answer to that was like, I want to know if this twin flame thing is real. Because if it's real, if this is a thing, this is like the biggest gamble I ever made in my life, right? If it's a thing, then I want to do it. I want to get through the path as like, I want to commit to it. I want to get to the 0 point, like, if there is someone I'm meant to be with, I want to be with them. Like, I want to do everything I can to I will commit to the path. And so I had the idea to make an album that would be a hyper sigil of the twin flame path, with the idea that as I'm going through and writing each song roughly in order, which is what happened, that the shedding of the conditioning that needed to happen would happen. And that when I got to track 10, it would be an 11-track album. I saw the structure before anything else came up. It would be an 11-track album. Tracks 1 and track 11 would be the same song, and track 11 would be a duet, right? Representing the twin flame connection and when it first happens, when you meet that person, and then when you come together in union, right? First there's 1, and then there's 2, right? So 1 and 11. Very clever of me. And track 10 would be a cover of Heaven is a Place on Earth, because that for me was the song that most seemed to represent that feeling of union, right? Twin flame, a lot of twin flame bloggers or people basically talk about the idea of twin flame union as being heaven on earth, right? So there we go. And 2 through 9 would be me, getting through it. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know how it's gonna happen. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but I'm gonna write each song, and basically I sort of made a deal with spirit on some level, like, guide me through this path and help me, write the right songs. And I will do it. Not only will I make the album, but I will, do the spiritual work that goes along with the songwriting, and to the very best of my ability. And it's not just about, oh, I'm going to write 9 songs and then, because then it's like, but you really like to do the journey of each song, spiritually, and to, not just like be like, oh, I'm writing, right? Just like it's just about writing 9 songs. You could probably do that in like a month if you really needed to, right? So I did that, and sure enough, because it had to all fit together and make sense, there was a way that the paradox needed to actually be solved, that I feel like I achieved in the writing. And track 9 had to very organically lead into track 10. It couldn't just be like, again, like, oh, I wrote some songs and then here's Heaven is a Place on Earth. It has to feel like the whole thing fits together and one flows from one to the next, and that you see the evolution, and that by the time we get there, it's a completely natural transition into that track 10, that it feels authentic, it feels organic. So sure enough, I did that. And there I was, boom, I recorded that vocal. And then something extraordinarily bizarre happened. I don't even want to say my twin in this context, because again, I really cringe at even using that term on any person who hasn't agreed to it. So what I'm going to say is the person who originally catalyzed my twin flame awakening when it began, all the way at the start of the path, who at that point I had been out of contact with for years. They had moved away. It was, I really had been like, I'm just never going to see or hear from this person ever again. And at that point, I thought I knew the person who was going to end up being my twin, because there was someone on the horizon with those same signs and synchronicities, and I knew I was almost at that 0 point, right? I was almost at that point in the album where it would be like, oh, here it's here, and I'm like, I'm seeing it come in, and this really looks like a dynamic where there is all that twin flame polarity. There's stuff that we mirror about one another. I'm seeing all the same signs and syncs that come in, and I just had a feeling I was like, this person is pretty securely attached. Or they really seem that way. And probably if I were to embark on a relationship with this person, I bet it would be likely to be serious, because they really seem like they have it together and they seem really pretty stable. So so it felt like that anyway, right? I can only speak from my own experience. And then as soon as I sang that cover, as soon as I went into studio and I laid down that track 10 vocal for Heaven is a Place on Earth, the person who originally catalyzed my awakening, from whom I was very polarized back when I was started on the path, reached out completely out of the blue 3 days later. And then that week came over and confessed to having feelings for me that it basically amounted to like that there's a connection here that they couldn't explain. And they finally wanted to be honest with me about it. And wow, I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that whatsoever. And that doesn't mean that like everything has been smooth sailing from there, like believe me. But something that happened after that I didn't really understand until I looked at it until I was far enough away from it to kind of look back at it along the timeline and better understand what had happened. What happened after that was I was guided pretty strongly, because now I was like, because at this point I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Have I accidentally manifested 2 different connections with 2 different men who I would, gosh, I'd be happy with, as long as it was healthy and everything. Like gosh, I almost, when I was started out the path, like I never imagined that I could call in a relationship with a person who was like, I mean, they were just, they were both really amazing. It was sort of like, okay, whatever the twin flame path has done for me, like if I can manifest this kind of a relationship from the 0 point that I'm in right now, like this is great. This is better than I ever thought that I would, like, I hate saying like better than I ever thought I would do. It's not like, but like this is great. I asked Spirit to send me a partner with all these things, and this is wonderful. I'd be very happy. So I was really confused because, of course, me being like very autistic, rules oriented, I'm like, who am I supposed to be with? Who's the real one, right? And so I was guided to say a novena. She just showed up for me in a couple different places. An aspect of Mother Mary called Mary Undoer of Knots. And I just felt very strongly like, I should say a novena to Mary Undoer of Knots to undo the tangles that have happened in my love life. And basically like let whoever is in my highest good. And I realized looking back afterwards that I had passed the test, quote unquote, that I had once felt it was impossible, which was back at the start of the path when that person had told me that you'll know that you've reached unconditional love when you could be just as happy with them or without them. And essentially what I did when I said it, that novena, was I submitted that. I said, whoever I'm meant to be with, or whoever is in my highest good, whoever is, I guess that was kind of what I'm saying, is I could just be just as happy with that person or without that person, with or without that original twin flame, right? That I'd gotten myself to a point where I could manifest a connection that had been beyond previously what I'd ever dreamed would have been possible. And that, I felt, for me, I was like, oh, I think that means that I'm at the 0 point, because I reached that track 10 as I said I was going to do. And being that I think that the creation and singing of my songs, and this works for me with cover songs too, like I will sing cover songs and stuff will happen. So even if I'm not writing it, if it's part of the work in a narratively important, kind of way, that also has effects in my reality, I've noticed. So when that happened, I believe that was basically the thing that created the circumstance that allowed me to pass that test, quote unquote, of do I really unconditionally love this person? Because could I be equally okay with them or without them? And I allowed the universe, Marianne Dewar, not specifically, right, to make that decision. I no longer was in a place of attachment where I was like, it has to be this person. I was like, you know what? I'm doing great at manifesting these connections. Send me whoever's in my highest good. So what I would advise you is, if you really want to know if you're at the 0 point, give spirit a marker. Lay down a benchmark in advance and say, when I see this or when I reach this, that's when I'll know. And I very much strongly feel that that original impression that I had of unconditional love specifically being about, can you be equally as happy with them or without them? That for sure I feel informed. I think that is even less that it's categorically true, although it's certainly mathematically true. But it's less that like that is the marker, and it's more that that is what my idea of it was. And that's how spirit used my own understanding, my own model in order to facilitate that. So if you have an idea of what that is, what that looks like for you, it might show up in that way, right? It might not show up in my way. I think it showed up to me because that was specific to my idea of the thing. If your idea of unconditional love is like, I mean, I don't even know, right? If it's like, I don't know. I know because I wake up happy every day and it doesn't matter if I'm single or partnered. Maybe that's it. And maybe there's something that shows you that, right? You've marked, maybe it's your, maybe you go like every day, I don't know, you go like every day for 6 months or something, and your heart rate variability on your Apple Watch shows that like you are just as happy when you're single as when you're partnered. I don't know. But maybe whatever it is, it will show up to you. Spirit knows the language that you think in, so it will be able to communicate to you in those forms and those frameworks. And if you give it a benchmark, trust me when I say there were all kinds of delays that happened in the making of the album that ensured that I wasn't just able to force things through before the organic growth actually happened. And sometimes that was in the form of writer's block. For like a full year, that was in the form of me not being able, God, I think 2 years almost I spent not being able to find a producer to work with. Because Spirit at that time was actually like, no, you need to build the repatterning project. You need to be able to afford the producer that you're eventually going to hire. You start writing the song, sure, no problem, but you need to do this first, right? That's the way that I make meaning out of that, looking back anyway. So there was certainly lots of delays along the path that meant that I wasn't able to strong arm my way to that benchmark without actually undergoing the organic process. And so if you give Spirit a framework like that, it will work with you. It will absolutely work with you, work with you, and it will stop you from moving forward on it when you need, there will be delays, there will be, someone gets another project, someone gets sick, can't work for a while, someone, there's financial holdups, or there's other things, or you just have writer's block. You can't write a song for that next track that you really feel great about, like actually going in and spending thousands of dollars on, and you need to sit there and while you're working on it more, that's when the growth happens, or whatever that looks like. So that's a way that you can know. I can't know for you, but that's the way anyway that I can sit here and say, because these things happened, and it's not like I still don't have more, like we always have work to do on ourselves, etc. And I'm not saying that like this last stretch of time has not also been really challenging and called me into new and even greater levels of spiritual maturity. But that 0 point of secure attachment, the metric of which I had said was, I'll be happy just as happy with them or as without them. That thing happened in my reality very clearly. And that's the way that I can sit here and in any way even say like, yeah, I kind of think I'm at the 0 point. And if it weren't that clear, I don't think I'd be saying that. And even then, like, I'm not saying I can't like fuck my shit up and like backslide. Like I'm not, it's not like, oh, I'm here, I have reached it. It's something that certainly it's like, yeah, a mind once expanded can never return to its original dimensions. So yeah, when you really do integrate that understanding, it does bring that, it lands in your body in a way that I don't think you can really forget very easily. But I'm just not ever going to be served by the attitude of like, oh, I've done everything, I'm good, right? Because the minute I say that, I'm gonna get my ass kicked. So even though, even though there is more expansion, the fact that that very specific set of circumstances happened is what causes me to make that claim. And that's what I would advise you to do as well. Make that benchmark. Don't make it something that's going to be like super easy, like, oh, when I finish this like workshop or whatever. For me, it was about getting 10 tracks in on an album that I'd never made an album that long before. My longest album before that was like, 5 or 6 tracks basically. And this idea of building a business to fund this album that was going to be this thing that was a much bigger project than I'd ever even written before. It was like, like when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain and you're just like, looking at this impossible road before you and you feel like you can't even see the hand in front of your face because it's so foggy. So you don't want to make it something that is super easy. You want to make it actually in some ways something that is achievable and something that will ideally also grow you spiritually. And there is a real, I think, reason why making and funding that album, especially like a multi-genre album that was designed to really show off all my different strengths as a songwriter and as a vocalist, was something that was like, wow, that would be a real big project. That would be bigger than anything I've done before. It would be more expensive than anything I've done before. This album has definitely cost me upward of like 30 grand. I don't even have the exact number, but it was a lot. And that was just bigger than than anything I'd ever done before. But I think I also had the idea that being a person who makes full-length albums and can afford them and can, I hired my individual producers, but I didn't produce it myself, but someone who can afford to work with the right producers for the right tracks, etc., and someone who can create and curate this experience for themselves and achieve that and finish it. That was, I think, a big part of who I aspired to be. And now, it's not done. Still waiting on the bonus track to come together, but it's like, it's like very small pieces that have to come in. So I'm really happy with how it all turned out. So no one can tell you if you're at the 0 point, and we are all very bad judges of whether we are at the 0 point because every level is gonna feel like a new thing that you haven't done before. But what you can do is you can set yourself that goal and you can say, when I get to this point, this is how I'll know. So whether it's, I did it in an album, you could do it in, I would almost say maybe don't do it in a novel, because that's something that you can really just sit down and write yourself. And I think for me, the fact that there were so many moving parts and it took money and it took connections and it took discernment and it took creativity, yes, but it took all these outside things. I think that made it a bigger thing. I'm not saying you can't do it in a novel. Maybe you can. I don't know. Try it, see if it works for you. But whatever that looks like, I feel like really feel into your heart. And if you make it also a part of like, hey, when I'm in inner union, when I'm my best version of myself, making this kind of a thing or doing this kind of a thing is something that I aspire to be able to do. That is part of my vision of myself. I think that helps. That helps it be big enough. So and then spirit basically will be able to tell you you're at the 0 point, which is going to be way more reliable than anything that me or Jep and Shalea or anyone else could ever tell you. So doing things like that, where you say to spirit, send me a sign for this, tell me when I'm ready for that, etc. It's a great way to increase your dialogue and communication with the universe, the unseen forces that be. And that's a pretty big benchmark to set, but I think that's, as far as I know, I think that's the most reliable way. It's the way that I used, so maybe hearing how I did it will give you an idea how you might want to do it, and then you'll have a nice track to measure your progress by. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you have ideas for, like, if you've thought of something while I was talking and you're like, oh, I know what I'm going to do, put it in the comments. I would love to hear that. I would love to actually hear about ideas that other people have to either hypersigillize their twin flame path or otherwise measure their progress as they traverse that algebraic number line and come together toward their 0 point of inner union. So yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know your ideas. Good luck, everybody, and I'll see you next time.